welcome to 2021 and
That's right.
Super Respectable. My name is still David Lewis, and I'm still in The Hague. And with me in San Francisco, our new office, is Tosh. How's it going?
Hey,
Happy New
I'm
Year.
good. Happy New Year to you. How's the first 12 days of your New Year going?
Terrible.
Oh, I know. And why is that? To let the listeners know, you're in lockdown still.
Well, to be honest, it's the same as it was last year. Nothing really changes. In fact, things get crazier, as we discussed before we started recording.
Yeah,
Everybody in the world is watching what's going on in the United States, and
yeah.
it's just madhouse.
And it's only been
So
12 days of the New Year. It's not
it's
even
been
we're not
12
even.
days. It's one of those things. It's like we had a false start. Let's go back again and try
Yeah.
to start the year
Let's
off in a
let's let's
better.
call them. Yeah. Let's call them mulligan. Let's try. Let's reset 12
A
days and start again.
mulligan. That's a good word for it.
It's I know you and I we talked about it. We're talking about, of course, the whatever you want to call it, the riots on the Capitol, the siege on the Capitol, the coup on the Capitol. It's craziness, man. What's happening there? And it's unbelievable that something like this could even happen in the United States of America. You know?
Yeah, I mean, my theory is just that they let it happen. They
Oh yeah,
just
totally.
there's more than enough police and military and intelligence and whatever they need in Washington,
Hmm, hmm.
of all places, to stop someone from walking in and wrecking havoc. It's just like the most well planned foreign terrorist attack could never achieve what was achieved there.
By hillbillies and rednecks and these
Yeah,
people who are, it's
but
you know
not
what
but not all of them were fitting the definition of hillbilly and redneck. I mean, some of them were, coming from Long Island, New York, and had white collar jobs.
yeah, it's it's
Yeah,
just a weird thing, like, it's unimaginable, and, like, I know people are talking about, like, "Let's just wait it through, it's only, like, 9 more days until the transition stuff," but, like, people should be held accountable for what they did, like, I mean, like, they broke the law and, like, 4 people died, and, it was,
5.
5 people died, and, like, somebody, who shall I don't wanna say his name anymore because 'cause I'm not he, like, incited some of the people should, like, whether, no one should be pardoned, no one should, like, be whether it's in office or out of office. I mean, like, if you and I broke the law, we would be held accountable. These people should also be held accountable, no? Like, for what happened?
That's the highest ideal of the United States, is the rule of law. No one is above the law. So we'll see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah, it's weird. And then what's that? So, like, what's happening with COVID in the Netherlands? You guys have extended the lockdown.
Yeah, there's a press conference happening as we speak.
Yeah,
They've extended by 3 weeks the lockdown. It was meant to end on the 19th of January,
yeah.
but it'll now be the 9th of February. But I don't hold out much hope that that'll be the end of it.
It's I can't like here. There's no. I mean, Canada generally, it's not great. Where I am, it's not worse, but it's okay. But your home province of Ontario has extended their lockdown as well because numbers are really bad. My sister and your extended family who live in the UK have been affected by a second variant lockdown as well. And in the states, like, it's horrible when it comes to COVID as well. I think like Los Angeles has become like ground zero now
Mm.
for the second for COVID as well. So like it's really like not looking great. I think some of the numbers I saw recently were worse than the highest peak they were in the prior year, worse than they were a year. So like
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around that fact, because I think like peak fear was March and April. Everybody didn't really know what was going on and was
totally,
freaking out and washing their groceries in bleach and washing their hands till the skin was raw. And then now people are just numb and bored and tired of it
yeah.
all. But it's actually, the virus doesn't get tired; it just keeps going.
It gets stronger and has little
Yeah,
children
crazy,
miniature
crazy.
viruses and stuff. Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of mine half an hour ago, and he was asking me how the situation. He lives in Turkey, so he was asking me like how the situation is. And I said the one thing that's really strange here that I've noticed. I don't know if you can compare or not because you went through the Netherlands and then Italy. In Turkey, everyone was wearing masks all the time. Like pretty much, if you left your house, you're wearing your mask all the time in restaurants, even outside. blah 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 blah. But here, it's really weird. We don't go out too often, but I've noticed some people are much more liberal minded with their masks, like and like even in Turkey, even if people took their masks off to take a breath, you could tell that they were underneath their chin or on their arm or whatever. But I see people walking around here and there's like no visible mask whatsoever anywhere, right? Of course, I don't say anything. I don't. I just watch. But like, it's a little weird, like to see that people like I can understand that like the liberal mentality or the freedom mentality, sort of like within people as well. But then I was just telling them like literally like you've traveled, I've traveled, like just wear your fucking mask. You know what I mean? Like it'll solve all your problems. It's not that difficult, man. Like, of course, if there's no one around or you're in a field, go ahead, take your mask off. But if there's people around, this and that, like just wear your mask, man, and keep distance. Like, we're still going through this, but the solution is there. Cause like I don't know what the vaccine rollout is like in the Netherlands, but they've started here in Canada with problems, of course, why aren't like vaccines being thrown away? Why isn't it being stored properly? But the goal is to get everyone vaccinated by September. But whether you take the vaccine or you go for herd immunity, like we're still in the middle of this at the moment. So like the best thing you could do in this situation really is just to follow protocol, no? Like whether that's staying home or if you're going out to wear your mask. Like I know we're frustrated in this, but there's no other solution. Like no, there's no other alternative, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the Netherlands, they've only just come around to the mask wearing. I think it was, March until September, October.
Yeah.
It was very common for people not to wear masks in the shops, grocery stores, any indoor place. And it was only in December 1st when they made it a law to
Yeah.
wear a mask that you start seeing it everywhere. So yeah, it's here. It's probably even more so than Canada. The lack of mask wearing. I think you don't see people really wearing it if they're in the park or. I mean, I don't wear a mask when I go for a run
No,
outside.
of course. I'm not talking about like hyperventilating because you can't breathe. Like I'm talking about using common sense, right? Like that's pretty much just it. And so, like when we walk on the park, of course, we don't wear our masks too, but we keep distance. But like, I don't know, it's just strange. Like when I saw the whole thing that was happening last week on the Capitol, I started thinking like, how many people are going to get COVID because of these gatherings? Like,
Yeah, I read that some members of Congress got COVID because some of the people that they were sheltering with were Republican members who refused to wear masks, and sure enough, they got the virus.
Yeah, maybe that'll. Knowing the Republican Party in politics, they'll probably blame it on some unseen force. They won't believe in it and stuff, and so it's
Mm.
frustrating and chaotic. But I hope it gets better. Like I mean, we're trying to live as simply like as normal as possible within reason, right? I mean, we still go to the park. Once in a while, we'll order something out and stuff, but like we try to stay in. But like the big thing in our family is like we're gonna go buy a car. So like Halima and I are looking at cars to buy.
Oh,
So
exciting!
it's my first real first-hand car. I like, when I was younger, I bought a second-hand car and but this is gonna be a brand new car. So, have you
Move
bought
back to
one?
Canada and do your first Canadian thing: buying a
My
car.
buy my car. I mean, I need a car because like I've been using my sister's car, and then she's coming back, and she'll need her car. So, have you ever bought have you gone through the process of buying a car before?
Never owned a car in my life.
Uh,
I have used my parents' cars. Um, and then when I go back to Canada, the
yeah,
only place where I really use a car is it's definitely needed in Ottawa. You need a car to get around.
absolutely.
But I use Ubers. Um,
Oh,
and it's incredible. Like they're always around, even in my parents' neighborhood, which isn't exactly like a central neighborhood where you'd expect Uber drivers to be. They're there
yeah.
within 30 seconds, a minute. So you got to be ready when you call the Uber. Um,
So yeah, we're looking into cars. We went to a dealership yesterday, and like, I went in with the mentality of like, this guy's gonna totally rip me off. Like that's my
I love that that's the thing that people do when they go car shopping. It's like they
but
strategize the ultimate negotiation.
but we had a positive. We went to this. So my sister drives a Honda CRV, and she really likes it, and I've been driving it, and I really like it. So like the first principle when buying a car is that we're a Japanese car manufacturing family. Like we have to buy Japanese. Like
Okay.
it's if you don't, you're exiled. You're kicked out of the family. So like I went to the same dealership, and they found her file. So at least we're on good terms. That we're a referral. And so I think we're looking. We're gonna get a 2021 CRV, a brand new
Mm.
CRV, but of course within our budget and all that kind of stuff. So so now we're just in the game of negotiating final prices and this and that. But I didn't really know anything about car prices before I started this. I just like you can buy cars as cheap as like 15 grand up to like 115 grand, So
Yeah.
like, yeah, it'll be an exciting thing. Do you enjoy driving though? When you do drive, or is it not something that you,
Nope. I
no?
don't like it.
Very straightforward.
I think I'm in the right country for that. It's
Yeah,
very easy to get around here on a bicycle or public
yeah,
transportation. So I'm
yeah,
very,
yeah.
it really makes a big difference. But I understand the need to have a car. It's
I think once you
essential
start,
in some respects.
for sure, when you have like a family or you have people that like, you're going together somewhere, you need to go grocery shopping, this and that. Because like, when I lived in Turkey, I didn't have a car. When I lived in Malaysia, I did. But in Malaysia, you needed one because like it was too difficult. But like, I had this thing that when I got my license, when did you get your license? 16, 15, 17?
Six, 16, I think. Yeah.
Your first license, right? And then like your final one a couple years later or something?
And so it's everything in Canada is by province. So yeah, I did this written test, the theory
Yeah,
test, and then you can drive. I think with a
with certain
parent or
restrictions and
some
people and
restrictions, and then you have to do your G2, I think it's called, and then you pass your driving test, and then you can go on your own. Which I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I was too young to be handed the
totally.
responsibility. I was an idiot, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think kids' brains aren't fully developed and shouldn't be handed over to
A
driving really
motor.
fast pieces of metal.
I got same. It's even though it's a different province, the system is the same. Like we just call it different things, but written test, and then you get, and then you have to take another test, and then you have to wait a couple more years, and then you get your final license. You don't have to do a test, but you just convert it over. I got my license when I was 16 years old, and I was a complete moron, and like I like driving fast, not following the rules, blah 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 blah. And then for in my 20s, I hated driving, but now it's not bad. Sometimes I go on drives just for like an hour, half an hour, just listen to a book, and then like do it because
Wow.
the good thing about COVID is there's no one on the roads at night so here, and so like I can, and Vancouver's a very small city, so like I can go to the edge of town or to Stanley Park, which is a famous park, and drive around and come back, and I'll be back in like 20 minutes. So like but like if you ever sit in a car and you really think about it, it's probably one of the most dangerous things you're doing. It's so dangerous.
Really?
It's isn't it like you don't even pay attention anymore, but you're on this vehicle that's like, I don't know, a couple tons. It is machinery, and then at the end of the day, you might be doing everything right, but some idiot might do something stupid, and then you could be you could get pay for that, right? For his stupidity and stuff. And so I just think like I just get super nervous sometimes in cars. But I think the more you drive, you get more comfortable and you have muscle memory. So like I don't know if you haven't how long it's been, but like the minute you
Long
get back in,
time.
I'm sure it'll come back really quickly to you. I think your body remembers how to drive a car.
Yeah, I hope so for everybody else's sake.
But you still have a valid license?
I do. Yeah, I had the chance to get it converted into a Dutch license, but I figured I'm not going to drive here. It's better to have the Canadian thing going.
Is if you
Um,
end up buying a car in the Netherlands, is it cheaper or than Canada, or is it more expensive? Do you know?
I have no idea, to be honest. I think it's probably more or less the same. There might be higher taxes.
Oh,
The gas is probably more expensive, like the running costs,
yeah.
probably quite high. But the thing is, um, the roads are really high quality here. It's very
Really?
smooth. Like when I was back in Ottawa for September, October 2019, I took the
Yeah.
bus to go to work, and my parents drove a few times. It was like the car was going to be destroyed with driving on the roads, just like
Potholes,
really huge
crash.
potholes. I was kind of appalled at the state of the roads, but I guess that's
Yeah.
what happens with winters.
Yeah, yeah, it destroys it. Anyways, let's start off the new year with my presentation. So
Yeah,
I
let's
want
hear it.
so this is more of a little bit of a discussion because I need your guidance because this is a topic you're an expert on. So
Oh wow.
over the holidays, I started like reading more about investing and finances and trying to get my life in order financially. And so like I know that you are involved in the stock market, me no, but I started getting really interested in some of the biggest trades in history, like where people have profited the most. And this one that I heard about a few years back, but I didn't really know came up. It was when George Soros almost broke the Bank of England.
Mm.
And so I was really, really fascinated with how this could happen. So like I learned the story and I'll go through it, but I have questions for you at certain points because I didn't understand some of the financial
I'll
jargon.
struggle on that.
But it's
Yeah.
okay. We'll work together. If you and I can work and we can get a C plus, then well, I'm happy. And so So firstly, George Soros is a billionaire investor. He has a really interesting life. He actually grew up in Hungary, and he was part of, like, he grew up through World War II. He was in the camps and stuff. So he made his way out of the camps, moved out to London, where he did his bachelor's, his master's, and his PhD, and started working in finance industry. And he's actually a lot of people, I think, in the financial world know him, but he keeps a sort of a low profile. So like, I don't think the average everyday person knows him, but he's a big philanthropist. He's very left wing, liberal minded. He supports many good causes. I heard that he's given almost, I think his net worth is 8 billion now, but in his lifetime, he's donated like 15 billion or to charitable causes, making him the most quote unquote charitable person or billionaire ever, which is
Mm.
really great. So, and he is works mostly in hedge funds, I believe. But what happened was that please correct me, because this is your thing, because my understanding could be flawed in this. So I read that after World War II, to because of the such the negative effects of the war on the European economies and the systems, the European countries decided to form a union, the EU, right? The idea was that if economies and the politics were more involved, they wouldn't go to war against each other because it would be like mutually assured destruction, right? They pretty
Right.
much went to war against each other. So even though this was the case, the euro was only introduced in 1999, which is almost 50 years after the war. But in 1979, they decided to link the fixed rates of the different currencies in the EU, and this would remove the exchange rate fluctuations, the differences in the different currencies, and they called this the ERM, the exchange rate mechanism.
I gotta
So,
take notes.
no, there'll be a test at the end.
Yeah.
So, uh, uh, um, so the exchange rate mechanism was this idea, that like the rates would be similar to one another and be connected with one another. However, there was a negative of this too, because this would take away from individual rates as well, and to make
Mm.
the individual banks of each country more vulnerable. But because at the time this was either it was this case, or that we work together and we could have more stability. So the banks went with, and the countries went with the latter, working together. But one of the negatives of this, in the looking back, was that if too many people would buy different currencies in business or trading, national banks would have to sell their currencies, thus relating in fluctuations, right? So the idea between unions, this I know I learned from economics. The idea between working together is that we can have more of a stable currency and we can have similar rates. But if you're working within multiple currencies, if businesses are borrowing for whatnot, or if some billionaire comes in and withdraws like $10 billion and stuff, then the banks have to sell the individual currency to them, thus counteracting the working together,
So
right?
they were trying to keep equilibrium with their
Totally.
respective
Yeah.
currencies,
Yeah.
even though they weren't like a euro at that time. At that time.
Exactly. It was a starting point to the euro, right? But there were
Mm.
still some flaws, and this is actually interesting because some economists and politicians realized that the ERM wouldn't work. It was significantly flawed because every country is unique, and you know this, living in the EU. There's different demands, there's different
Mm.
economics, there are different institutions. So they understood that countries needed to balance their individual interest rates versus individual inflation and economic growth. That a joint union wouldn't work together. And Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK, understood this very, very significantly, and that's why the EUK was actually not part of the ERM, which is
Hmm.
kind of, I guess, relevant to what's happening in Brexit. They've
Yeah.
always been outcasts. But by the 1990s, Thatcher's power had diminished, and what happened was the Chancellor of the Exchanger, which is a really cool title I like in the EU,
Exchequer.
Exchequer,
Yeah.
which is pretty much the head of the bank, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got funny names, eh? It's
Yeah,
basically the Minister of Finance, as far
Minister
as
of
I
Finance.
know.
But it sounds so cool, Exchequer. But so what happened was, so in the 90s, by the 90s, Thatcher's power was diminishing. And if you want to know why, watch The Crown. They do a good example.
Very good.
Very good. And what happened was John Major, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he actually was pushing for the the UK to join the ERM, and that was his main platform. And because of that, he actually became Prime Minister. So that was his main thing, that he wanted to join, wanted to be inconsistent, like with his brothers and sisters in the EU, and be part of this controlled rate for against the pound. So, but here's the interesting thing: is when the UK joined the ERM, it was actually in a recession, right? So it wasn't doing great at all, and we're talking like early 90s. And so they wanted to, but here's the funny thing is once they joined, they wanted to reduce interest rates to counteract the recession, but they couldn't because when they're part of a union, they can't act individually anymore, right? So because of this, the UK was suffering significantly, especially from 1990 to 1992. So what the bank would do to counteract the interest rates and the recession was they would, whenever they had extra international currency, international funds, they would try to buy pounds from around the world, right? So this is something I'm not certain on, but I believe international currencies are bought and stored by foreign countries and their banks. I know China buys them. I know the States buy them. And what it does is it affects the original currency's rates. So sometimes countries, what they'll do is they have extra funds or extra money. They'll try to buy their pounds or their currency back, right? To adjust the rates. Am I correct?
Yeah, although it's not really happening physically anymore. It's all just little digits on a screen moving around.
Yeah. So the early 90s, John Major, Prime Minister Major, he's trying to buy back pounds, but he's not very successful in doing it. And so the projection is that the pound will devalue because of the problems in the UK. And so Soros, he realizes this, and he's a hedge fund manager. Dave, how do you explain what a hedge fund is? A hedge fund is like
they're usually a private fund that takes both sides of an investment. So
yeah,
they'll have concurrent investments. One would be a bet that a stock would go up, and at the same time, they'll take another investment that would be a short. Which please don't ask me to explain short selling. I'll fall flat on my face.
Yeah.
So that's betting that the stock would go down.
Yeah.
And they try and cover their bets that way.
Usually hedge funds are for rich people as well. A lot of people who
and that aspect.
yeah, they put in money and stuff like that. I think I was reading yesterday that mutual funds, hedge funds, ETFs, they're sort of similar, but they in operation, but they have different assets within them, and that they work in different ways, and that some are more long term, some are more short term. It's unimportant to the story. Anyways, he's a rich guy who works with rich people's money. We could just call that. And his specialty, by the way, was predicting big market events. So he could kind of do it. And so he saw what was happening and he wanted to devalue the pound. he saw that there was an opportunity in. So what he started doing was he started borrowing pounds from big banks and hedge funds around the world. So he would see if there were opportunities to buy these pounds. And what he wanted to do was then sell them to foreign exchange markets, forex markets, with the idea that if the pound was to devalue, that he will sell these pounds now, and then once it devalues, he'll buy them back from the forex market.
That's short selling. Good explanation.
Short selling, shorting. Pretty much, it's the opposite of what it's the default. The default is that we expect everything to go up and we make money, but some people can expect that things will go down and make money from it. And then I guess he's trying to not only expect it, but try to actually get the ball rolling with it, So, which sounds kind of illegal when you say it. It sounds kind of horrible, but I guess it's interesting how he did it. I guess he was able to predict something that was happening already. So, interestingly enough, by the end of August 1992, so now, they call it Black Wednesday, So by the end of August 1992, he builds about a $1.5 billion position against the pound. But still, with all this money, the movement that he's wanting with the devaluing isn't happening fast enough. So on September 16th, the president of the Bundesbank, which is a bank in Germany, he says in a statement, quote,
the Central Bank of Germany.
Central Bank of New Germany, sorry. He says he doesn't rule out that some currencies might come under pressure. And so Soros is like, this is it. This is the opportunity. With this statement, I'm going to, a lot of what people say fluctuate finances around the world. He's like, this is the turning point. I'm gonna give it my all and try to get this currency to devalue. So what Soros does is that same night, because of the time difference, when the European markets have closed and everyone's sleeping, he starts calling everyone he knows, and he just starts buying pounds like left, right, and center. He ends up buying overnight $10 billion worth of pounds on the open market. So on the 17th, the next day, when people wake up in England, it's in chaos because all the international currency for the pound has been owned by Soros pretty much, right? So they start. They start buying, but within 45 minutes of the markets opening in the UK, they buy $1 billion worth of pounds. The Bank of England, but it doesn't help. Within the next 15 minutes, they buy another $1 billion, all with permission from the prime minister, right? So then the then chancellor of the exchanger calls the prime minister and he asks if we can increase interest rates because we're having a problem right now. Interest rate is at 10%. And so initially the prime minister says no, but because the market is falling so rapidly at this day because of not being enough pounds, he increases the interest rate by 2% to 12. So I'm not an
That's
expert on
huge.
it. Yeah, I'm not an expert on interest rates, but one thing I do know is that even 0.5% of a difference on an interest rate is huge on an economy, right? So 2% in one day is crazy, right? So especially for a currency that's devaluing in an economy that's falling, raising interest rates would be disastrous. But they have no solution. What they end up doing is the day is so bad that by the end of the day, they've lost 27 billion pounds worth of money, this bank, and they had to increase interest rates to 15%, so another 3% by the end of the day. So so what happens is Soros at that point, he is able to sell his pounds back to the Bank of England, right?
There you
At a
go.
rate. There you go. So Soros sold all his pounds he has. At the end of the night, the UK government announces defeat, pretty much, against this one man. They suspend their currency from the ERM. They're like, we're not part of this union anymore. And then they actually canceled the second interest rate second interest rate increase, the 15%, but they keep the 12%. So so what happens is the pound falls hard that day, and so Soros makes $1 billion because he shorted the Bank of England, right? So he pretty much projected what was going to happen. He bought all this euro, and then he just kind of held it, and then he ends up selling it back at the right time to make $1 billion. They estimate that because of Soros's actions, he cost the taxpayers of the UK $3.3 billion, which I actually have issue with. I don't think he caused it per se. I think the Bank of England really was not prepared going into this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is just an opinion. But here's the positive part: is that what actually happened. A lot of economists say that there was actually a positive action, because what happened is, since the Bank of England, since the UK left the ERM, it was free of their rules and regulations. And afterwards, they actually rebuilt a lot. They spent the next 16 years expanding. And by 1997, the pound was extremely valuable. It turned back. Interest rates were cut again, so the economy was doing well. And the British economy actually took a turn after this situation. So a lot of people don't call it Black Wednesday; they call it White Wednesday, which is interesting. And they say that
it doesn't matter if you're black or white.
That's true. And so Soros did him a favor. So so at the end of the day, they say that each family in the UK ended up losing, I think, $15 because of Soros in 1992, because of what he did. But sorry, yeah, and sorry, one correction is that he didn't sell back the currency to the UK. He sold, I guess, on the international market, the pounds, and he ended up making $1 billion from it. So he shorted the Bank of England, and he became one of the most profitable. I think he was rich before this, but he made one of the highest grossing days in stock trading ever because of this action, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, they call it like the man who broke the Bank of England, because that's such a crazy thing that he did.
So I'm with you. Like, I understand basic stocks and stuff. I'm getting a hang of. Shorting, I'm still not an expert on, but I've read that it's extremely complicated. You need to really know what you're doing. You can actually, if you make a wrong move, you can actually lose much more in it, because you're actually betting against something, right? So
yeah. So when you buy a stock in the hopes that it goes up, the most it can go down to is zero.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the opposite, a stock can go, like, in theory, to $1 million, and your losses are infinite.
Infinite.
So,
Yeah.
so that's the risk.
But I wonder, though, like, if in the theory of either of trying to get something to happen, or something to either trying to push something to happen upward, or something to push something downward, in theory, I think this is where insider trading comes in, or I forgot the title, the word, when you encourage what happens, like when you make it happen to something. Like, if you, for example, if a company, for example, is making like a telephone, and then and for example, you sabotage the company, or international sabotage it, and the stock goes down, that's like obviously illegal in what you're doing, but you could short against that and you could make money too, right? If your CEO was arrested for this reason, or if the phone didn't work and stuff like that. Whereas like getting like a phone to be successful on the stock market is sort of up to chance, right? It's a prediction. So like
Mm.
I was just wondering, couldn't I'm sure there's a lot of sabotage and insider trading and trying to short things that they can control, right? Like people who are in the business.
I mean, it depends on which jurisdiction you're talking about. I mean, I like to think that the United States, Canada, and a lot of other established markets, it's not as prevalent. It definitely happens.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of controversy around short sellers because they're against capitalism. They're against things going up and people making money, but they have a role to play. Like just what George Soros did there, he pointed out an inconsistency and he like
Took
hammered away
advantage
at
of it.
it in a huge
Yeah.
way. And like you said, at the end of the day, in the long run, it's some people considered it a good thing what he did.
Yeah.
Um, so short sellers, uh, they are on the lookout for things like
Problem.
fraud
Weakness.
or lies or people who are misrepresenting what they're doing, and then
Yeah.
they'll advertise that like crazy and be like, "Look, this is not what they say it is. This telephone
Yeah.
doesn't work," and
Yeah.
then they need to advertise like crazy because the company has a marketing budget and everybody else has a vested interest in
Yeah.
saying that this thing's fine, whereas
Yeah.
they're really shouting against everybody else, and they really have a tough time sometimes of getting vindicated.
Do you think that what Soros did was like just smart, or was it wrong from an investment point of view or a moral, ethical point of view? Did he do anything wrong? Did he hurt anybody? Like, just your financial opinion, or did he just see a loophole and he went for it? Like, he didn't break the law. He
He's
just
just a
smart.
very savvy, smart guy, and he probably had resources that the rest of us didn't to exploit
Yeah.
that situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't really say he did
It's a big
something terrible.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
big bet too, buying that much money and just holding it, like, internationally, just because it's in a well, a lot of these guys, by the way, I don't know how current investors work, but a lot of the older ones, they're incredibly well versed in their fields. They have a lot of experience as well, and I think they grew up in periods where the financial world really was like going through different revolutions and changes. So they really understood. Like Warren Buffett, I think, is an extremely smart individual who really can see things that happen, right? And so a lot of these guys don't really care about like the technology sectors or the computers or the tech and stuff.
yeah,
They realize basics and they make their money that way, right?
like that would be way, way beyond my circle of competence. I mean, like you mentioned that I invest in things. I would never invest in currencies or like physical commodities or things like
Yeah,
that. I just wouldn't feel comfortable.
yeah.
I don't feel like I know enough about it.
So here's one thing I noticed. So I'm not an expert in any means whatsoever, but I've been reading, and like it's really not as complex as they make it out to be. If you spend your time and I mean, of course you're not going to learn it overnight, but if, for example, we started learning this stuff in high school, which I think investing in personal finance should be something that kids learn about, by the way, because it's a really important part. But I never learned it anywhere,
No.
other than if you start learning this stuff, I mean, not everyone needs to be a stockbroker or an investor, but I think people should invest their funds and their money and have proper savings for it. If people do learn this kind of stuff, it's not as complicated as they make it out to be. I heard one theory online that one of the reasons they make it complicated is so that they can control your money. Like you have to go to them, so they invest your money. They don't want you to do it. But there's a ton of resources now online, by the way, and so like not everyone needs to know what shorting is or what like passive investment is or what active investment is, but people should know what happens with their money, how it plays a role, how you can grow your money safely, how you can what a mutual fund is and stuff. I think this is important for most people.
Yeah, it's quite surprising to me. I've come across a lot of people who they actually have a fear of investing or the stock market, and it comes from like what you said, that probably thinking it's too big and too overwhelming to understand it and wrap your head
Yeah,
around it. But I
yeah,
think, like you said, everything's available online these days, and you could pretty much be self-taught. I started out uh, 10, 12 years ago, like with this self-directed investing,
yeah,
which can be risky and scary. But once you realize it's not,
yeah, yeah,
you do it in small amounts, and you do it in amounts that you're not gonna lose your house with.
sure.
then it's okay. Start off slow and start building, and then try and get an understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because you can do like, um, virtual investing and investing with fake money, but it's not real until it's the actual
Yeah.
money that you're going to lose. You're going
Yeah.
to do different things.
Well, also, I think like one of the first. So I've been so there's a lot of resources online, by the way. Now, like a lot of brokerages are online. There's a really I sent you two last week, Quest Trade and Wealth Simple. You should check out Wealth Simple. I'm really impressed with them. It's so easy to use, and it's Canadian based, so it does your TFSA, RRSP,
Mm.
this and that, and like it's really good. So like I think the first thing people need to realize is that like you have this stereotype that if you're investing, that you need to sit in front of your computer all day every day. That's like if you're an active investor, right? Like you're a day trader and this and that. But for the majority of people, you probably have some type of passive investment, meaning like you're saving for your kids' RESP, or for our non-Canadian listeners, that's Registered Education Saving Plan,
Very good.
or you're saving for like a house or a boat or your TFSA and stuff like that. And that's more passive, right? So that's where you have more safer long-term investments that'll produce yields 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, blah, blah, blah. And I was looking into the Canadian system, and I think the Canadian government actually does a pretty good job of trying to get you set up for the long term, right? If you start quicker, they'll do it. They'll help you for kind of down the line when you're ready to those major milestones in your life, right? If you want to buy a house or a car or kids' education or a wedding or et cetera, et cetera. So like we build it like that, but there are a ton of products out there. You don't need to have every single product there. You need to see what works for you. You need to do a good job. But if you're going to be a George Soros and stuff, then yeah, definitely know what you're doing before you short a currency or a bank. You have to be extremely intelligent. But the one thing I was going to tell you is that's so fascinating. We're talking 1992, right? So that's 30 years ago. So $1 billion in one day is crazy. But nowadays, people like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they make $2 billion a day because of stock differences or fluctuations as well. And so, like on Black Fridays, I think Bezos makes $1 billion or 2 billion easy in a day, which is crazy to think. It's just because people are shopping and clicking, he's making money, right?
Yeah, and they say that they don't consider their net worth or the stock price that much, but
They do.
come on, it must, it has
They
to.
do. They do. These guys, don't be stupid. These people are extremely smart. They know what they're doing. They might not be sitting in front of their computer all day because they got 1,000 things to do. But like people, you and I have talked about this. I remember rich people can make money very quickly, right? Even if you had $1 billion, you could make more money than anyone who worked towards it, because even just from interest alone, you could make crazy amounts, right? Or reinvesting. So these guys are extremely savvy in what they did. In addition, they created products that were able to bring in more wealth, right? So, like I think I read this week, Elon Musk just became the richest man in the world because of
He did, yeah.
right, yeah, 200 billion or something like that. His net worth over 2020 during the pandemic has gone like eightfold or something like that, because of Tesla stock, pretty much. So I think so. No,
Yeah,
eightfold
the
or
Tesla
fourfold.
stock looks like the COVID case chart.
The more you do it, the
Straight
more.
up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's crazy how wealth is accumulated, accounted for. How much money? $200 billion is insane, right? But I think that's more. Not to stay on topic. That's more on for people who kind of have companies who grow because of this and that. But for investors who work in the field of finance, like George Soros, they predict what's going to happen, or they make the best predictions possible based on the data that they have, right? And if you look at some of the stocks and stuff, I think people feel that like a lot of it's kind of like gambling and like not knowing. And there is a truth to that, but you can be very smart with it too. You can take your time and project things and see how things are. And if you look at the stock market over the last 100 years or what, generally it's an upward trend, right? Like generally there's dips, of course, with recessions
Mm.
and crises. What's the singular? What's the plural of crises? Crises.
Singular is Christ.
Crisis, and then crisis, crisis. Thanks. Maybe I should so generally though, like the idea is that things are upward moving over the long term. I was just looking yesterday at stocks. There were some companies that did okay during the pandemic as well, non-tech related companies too, slowly, and so people are always watching. And like I said, not everyone needs to invest in stock markets. You could do commodities, you could do bonds, you could do mutual funds, you could do hedge funds, you could
Bitcoins.
Bitcoin. I don't know. Do you think so? Do you think Bitcoin's a good investment? Most of these old traditional investors thinks it's garbage. I think it's garbage.
Yeah, I think it's weird to consider a currency as an investment. Like the whole point of your story is that George Soros made money off of a currency trade,
Yeah,
but the point of Bitcoin should be that it's stable. And
yeah,
you wouldn't want the Canadian dollar or the British pound to do
totally.
this or do
Or
that
the
because you lived in Turkey for some time and the
it
lira
was.
was all over the place, and it's really
I should
hard to manage your
I should
life.
I should have shorted the lira. Huh? I should have.
Should have shorted the lira. Yeah.
Yeah, I should
So
have.
like Bitcoin
I
right
can't.
now is people are making tons of money off of it, but
Yeah,
if they want it to be a currency that people are transacting with,
yeah,
it can't be both. I don't see how it can be both.
yeah. It's yeah, I'm what's your like when you do your stocks and your portfolio, what kind of things are you interested in? Like what kind of industries or fields? Like do you have an interest in certain things or are you diversified across the board?
When I first started out, I was being very conservative in what I was buying. Like I'd
Yeah.
buy Canadian banks and telecom companies and
Yeah.
pipeline companies, that sort of thing. Very stable businesses.
Yeah.
But then I realized 10 years later that that was a dumb idea because Amazon and Shopify and all these tech companies have just gone on a tear.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not like I've lost money, but I missed out on the opportunity to make a lot more money with the tech stuff.
I'm sure that the original stocks that you did, they were slow but steady, right? Like I'm sure that like they probably produced yields, but at a lower rate, right, than the tech companies.
Yeah, the point is when you buy these companies, you get the dividend because they're
Yeah.
stable and they can afford to give out some of their earnings to people because they don't have money to invest for further growth.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas a tech company or a startup, all their money is going back into the business and the stock price is going up and up and up because that's what needs to happen for the investors to be happy. They don't have a
Yeah.
dividend.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
one of the see, these tech companies now, if the whole thing is like, I wish I could have like 5 years ago. If I could go back in time 5 years, I would have known what to invest in for now, right? But like a lot of these companies are so overpriced for the average investor at this point that it's impossible to buy enough shares to be extremely profitable. Like Amazon's trading at what, like 1,000 something per share, right? Tesla's at like 700 some, or I don't know, these crazy numbers where you can only buy one
Tesla, they
500
did
something.
a split, so it was actually at an affordable level,
Yeah.
and they split the stock to make it a slightly more affordable level of like 300, and it's still gone up and up.
It's a, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it's an interesting concept. How it all works, and like I think people who are really into it really are like that's their lives. But for people who are kind of like who just want it in the background, it's totally possible. But people should learn, and there's a ton of resources out there. Like I just learned about TFSAs and RRSPs, what they really meant over the break, and like I have an opinion on which one I think is better, and this and that, and but like one thing I've noticed though is here in Canada I feel like the tax rate on a lot of this stuff is sort of high, right? Like if you're going to invest, whether I know they're tax-free savings or you have a non-registered account and this and that, but like I feel like if you're going to invest and the government's going to know what you're going to invest in, some of these taxes should be waived. No, like if you're going from an RSP or if you're going from a non-registered account, like your capital gains tax, I think is too much.
What a capitalist we have here. You abolish all taxes, come us
No,
back
not
to
a.
Canada. No, TFSA, you're totally fine. You can do whatever you want, and it's all tax free. It's
Yeah,
everything you do there is tax free.
your RSP
Um,
is when you withdraw, right?
yeah, and in theory, you're supposed to. These are two Canadian investment vehicles, people.
Yeah,
RRSP is you get taxed at the time you take the money out, which in theory, when you retire, you're at a lower
yeah.
tax
Tax
bracket.
bracket. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's yeah, I don't know. So do you do all that stuff too? Do you do TFSAs, RSPs, RESPs, RESP, ECT?
Yeah, I mean, I've moved from Canada in 2010, so I'm living off the exhaust fumes of the RRSP and TFSA amounts that I had at that time, because you can't
Yeah.
accumulate it if you're not a Canadian taxpayer or outside of the country.
Yeah.
Um, so my limit did not increase. I
Increase.
couldn't put in more money, so
So you've maxed
um,
out.
maxed out.
Oh man. So now you just have to wait, right? Until you can take it out or until you're retired.
Yeah, Yeah.
Actually, I know. So I'll link. So check out. Me too. The 6 years I was outside of the country, I wasn't eligible for TFSA and RSPs, but they calculated on the time that I was eligible from after 18, from 2009 or until now, and then RSP from when I was 18. So I have it, but like I think there's a cap, right? Each year there's like it's like $5,000 or $6,000 or something like that in the middle that
Yeah,
what you can
it's
contribute.
gone up. I think it's around 6,000 something per year.
But don't you think like even if you're not in the country but you still want to invest in it, don't I think there should be you should still be allowed to do it because isn't it beneficial ultimately for the Canadian government to have funds back in the country?
Well, not if they can't tax it. If you have a TFSA and there's no tax on it, then there's
Yeah,
no incentive for them to offer it to someone who's abroad and
but
not
for the
paying
RS
taxes.
but for the RSP, the assumption is that even if you're abroad, well, my assumption is that even if you're abroad but you're investing in it, the amount you're going to invest is gonna increase each year because of the limit. Then when you're back in the country, when you retire or whatnot, you're still going to have to withdraw it, and at that point, you can be taxed, right? So they can make money on something. They can still make whether you're in country or out of country for the RSP, you still have to pay tax.
That's true, but as I understand RRSP, I think you get an amount that you can invest in an RSP. I
Yeah.
think it's in relation to your income, to your
Oh,
whatever. So
if you're
it's
not
based on
declaring
what you're
anything.
earning. Yeah. So if you're earning Turkish lira, but you contribute, it would just be way too complicated for them to try and figure it out. So it's all
Oh.
based on a Canadian tax return, and then you have a certain
Oh.
amount of yeah.
What's how is the financial systems? I don't know what you would call this, like a social security systems in the Netherlands for people. Is it pretty good, do you think, or is it better than Canada, or is it worse? Like, do people have these stabilities and these resources?
Um, as far as I'm aware, there's no such similar product as a TFSA or registered retirement savings plan. But the Dutch pension system is regularly voted like best in the world or
Oh,
second
really?
best in the world. It's very strong. It's very much like the Dutch government kind of forces the companies to provide pension contributions for their employees.
Yeah.
And that's become the trend in different countries. Like in the United Kingdom, they've recently made it a requirement for companies of a certain size to contribute because a lot of them were not doing
Yeah.
anything for their employees.
Yeah.
So I think the Netherlands has a very good and very stable system for many things, and definitely the pension system is very strong and reliable.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. It's a really I think if you're oh, my cat's watching. If you're if people like if you're just an average everyday Joe or whatnot, I think these countries have really good systems if you just want to live your life and do your thing. If you're people like George Soros and stuff like that, you really need to have an understanding of that, but do more, right? That's where if you like want to become a billionaire or a millionaire, really understand finances, then you need to take the risk, but an educated risk, I would say, after you know what's happening. And so, I would still argue. My argument is that there's so much information out there now that I don't think you need to go through brokers anymore or banks or this and that. If you feel that you have the knowledge or you work with other people or whatnot, uh, you can kind of do it on your own for much cheaper because brokerages take a huge. I think
oh,
what is it?
it's
Most brokerages take
huge. And
$10 a trade or something
in
like that, right?
Canada, for the longest time, they were making so much money, these brokerages and banks, because of the, like you said, the control they had. And the internet really changed things
Yeah,
in that respect, because one, people could just read about it and learn that they were getting charged more than in other countries.
yeah,
And two, other companies could come up and offer their service for less on an online platform.
yeah,
So I'd imagine like the 80s and 90s for these banks were like prime time for them to make tons of money off of the ignorance of people. But
yeah,
now that people can Google and see like what's a charge for like a ETF, exchange traded fund, compared to
yeah.
a mutual fund, and they realize it's such a big difference,
Uh,
then I think it's a
we should
no-brainer.
Sure. We should give a disclaimer that we neither endorse nor nor discourage anything. Everyone should be educated in what they do and take
Oh yeah,
responsibility
you're
for their
supposed to do
individual
that
actions.
for these things. I am not a financial advisor. Don't follow my advice. Do your own research. Don't sue me.
Yeah. It's I think a lot of it though is very like if you watch shows on TV like Billions or like any other financial show, it makes it seem like very, very like captivating and like enjoyable lifestyle and stuff like that. But I think it's an incredibly stressful life. Like, if you're knowing what's happening and you have so much money but if you like numbers, if you like technicalities, if you like kind of things being sorted out and you have an understanding, it's a really fascinating discipline, I think. And I don't know, 2021, like it's a new year. Maybe some people are saying it'll crash. Some people think it'll have a good year. I think let's just learn and see what George Soros does. I always tell people, you could do what Soros does, but with like your amount, how you want to invest. It doesn't have to be $1 billion. Maybe it could be $1,000 and just kind of
Yeah,
get to
don't
see.
go calling around various people for billions of dollars of their money to invest, or
Yeah.
maybe try that and make an investment fund. Who knows?
There you go. Just as we end off, one thing I thought about last week was like, I was like, oh, I wonder what Warren Buffett holds in his assets. So I went, and this public, by the way,
Mm.
So I went and I looked at his portfolio, and it's like really good stocks. But the problem is like he owns so many shares of them that it's like, of course, he's a billionaire. He owns like 20 billion shares of this and 15 billion shares of this and 2 billion shares of that. And like, if you wanted to compete at the same level, you could own maybe like one share of each company because like they're so expensive, right? Like Berkshire Hathaway share is like $250,000 for
Yeah, I
one
wanted to look that up. Actually, it's one of the most ridiculous ones out there.
share.
You could buy a house with one share.
There you go. But I think what you could do is at least learn some of the principles he uses in trading, right? And so kind of see how he evaluates and how he gives.
Wow.
He's very open minded with how he works and stuff. And
What was your guess for the price of a Berkshire stock?
250, 250,000.
Yeah, so it's 350,000 US dollars for one share.
One share. So that's crazy. That's like your whole savings maybe at the end of your life or your retirement. But on the other side,
Wow.
like Apple is a little bit more reasonable. It's like 1,000 something, right? And it's got an upward trend. Netflix, you could do. There are a lot of little shares and stuff. I saw this amazing documentary, and they pretty much the argument was that they've done experiments where they've given animals like, have you seen it? They've given animals like darts and boxes.
And they do better than the average.
They do better than the average stock picker who has experience in it. So there's no like guarantee that like just because you're in the industry and you know what you're doing, you can yield outcomes better. That's why they advise you to be more.
They'll get rich off of charging you to
There you go.
give your money to them.
There you go. There you go.
That's the trick.
Anyways, that's I hope in the 2021 year people are happy and healthy, both
wealthy.
physically and wealthy financially. Learn. It's an interesting thing. I think everyone should have some type of background in how your money is used by the government or opportunities you have, because like if you just keep it in the bank, due to inflation, it'll just be worth less eventually, right? So you might as well do something with it.
Yeah, greatest risk is not doing anything at all.
There you go. That's unless you own gold, then you could just own gold bars in your house. Then you might be okay.
Yeah, you could stroke it and talk to it and.
Where would you go to sell a gold bar in Canada, by the way? Is it like a gold market or a gold store?
I have no clue. You'd probably get ripped off, and they're quite heavy, so you'd need to have security with you while you go and do that thing. I wouldn't go to a pawn shop because they'd be like, it's,
fake.
I'll give you this for it,
Yeah.
and you'd get ripped off.
But yeah, it's an interesting world. It's a very fascinating thing. I wish I went back and I did my undergrad in business because it's so fascinating. but it is what it is.
It is what it is. You can be self-taught business investor, business person.
Maybe Super Respectable can short a currency eventually, and we could be famous for that. That'd be amazing if we, without hurting anybody. But
that would be super respectable to do that.
Totally. There, off camera, offline, we'll discuss in details because I don't want this to be used as evidence against us in any court proceedings.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go offline to discuss such illicit dealings.
There you go. Anyways, everyone, Happy New Year. Thanks for coming back. Looking forward to the year. I hope it's a good one, both globally, personally, and socially.
Podcastly.
All right, you guys. Take care.
Ciao.